Yo, what's up? This is BeutNoise, and on this video we're gonna go through the basis of my new track, Friction. So this is a very old version of the project, just because in the new one I have everything in audio. So here you can see the patch and everything. And the first sound we're gonna go through is this main flute sound, which in this case is made with Serum. And this is how it sounds by itself. It's really simple to make. I'm gonna turn off all the effects so you can hear it without anything. So the main patch is really simple. It's just one oscillator with a custom shape. You can copy the harmonics. It's basically like a square-ish wave. The noise is air count, which is a default noise, and you have the sub mainly, I think, for accentuating like the fundamental of the sound. A bit of filtering. I have two LFOs. The first one is just modulating the noise, and the second one is modulating wavetable position, which is, in this case, I think it's doing nothing. Totally nothing. I think I had like a different wavetable before. Volume, filtering, and I think that's it. The effects are not being modulated at all, and a little bit of the sub. For the effects, I just have distortion, a bit of comp filtering. In this case, I didn't move that. I just use it as a overall tone shaping of the sound and compression with a multiband on and a bit of gain, and that's it. For the post-processing, I'm gonna go one by one. The first one is Redux Ambience. I use this a lot, and in this case I think I'm using it to kind of like give the high end a bit of crunchiness, you know? You can see it's a lot more airy with it off. Then I have the stock Ableton Reverb. You can copy the settings. It's really subtle, but it comes out after the compression and the distortion. Then I have Hybrid Reverb. This is the stock impulse response. I just changed the psych to 46% and like put the stereo all the way down. And this is giving the sound a bit more realism. You can see it with the on. It sounds a lot less digital and synthetic. Then I have OTT, and I turned off all the upward compression. You can copy the settings also. It's just like the time on 1000% and I'm on a 40. Then I have amp. In this case, I'm just using it to boost the high end, I think. Next one, I have another hybrid reverb. In this case, I'm using a random percussion sample, this one. And I'm just using it as sort of as a cabinet, because if you get the size of the impulse really low, in this case 200%, you boost a lot of like the low mids and the low end of the sound, and you can see it's a lot more boomy with it on, and it gives the sound a lot more presence on the low mid range. Then I have the first EQ, just to like cut a bit of like the annoying frequencies of it. Another EQ, shaping the sound. Next, I have a plugin that I really love to use to kind of like flatten the frequency response of any sound. It's basically a compressor that compresses each frequency individually, and you have sort of this threshold, and you can set up which parts of the frequency response of the sound you want to compress. Then I have a glue compressor, and in this case I'm just using it to soft clip the sound, and a limiter to push the volume a little bit more. The next patch is this really small one shot that I made on Faceplant. And I'm gonna turn off all the effects, and you can see it's just a wavetable from the factory spectral wavetables. This is how it sounds without any effects. I'm using sine wave modulating the phase, so basically FM of the wavetable with this shape. For the first lane of effects, I have this low cut first, then I have this notch, and I have a disperser. The disperser is what is giving it this sort of pitch movement. And for the last lane of effects, first we have this OTT that I made on, I think on multipass with the dynamics. Really simple. It's basically copying the settings from the original one. Then I have this multi-band saturation, also on multipass. Then I have a bit of gain and soft clipping with the transient shaper. That's it. So the next sound is this percussive Nero bass that I'm using as a fill sometimes. This sound is made with a really simple and interesting technique that I use for most of my tracks when I try to do this really nasty and distorted Nero sounds. And this is how it sounds without any effects. So the way this technique works is that I go and I randomly pick like any percussion sample that I like, that have some sort of interesting tone, and I drag this track, and I have several of this. And I suggest you to do your own ones. It's really funny. Just like do distortion racks to put random samples on. One really important part of this technique is try not to go for samples that have like a long tail, because if you do, it would be mostly a mess. And let me show you. This is the sample that I used, and I'm using the Beats warp mode with the off mode here and the transient envelope all the way down. And if you leave it all the way up, this is how it sounds. A mess. So let's go one by one. It's basically just OTT and distortion, and I'm using OTT mostly for tone shaping than compression, because the amp mode on like any like heavy or lead mode is really distorting the sound in a way where like basically you have no dynamics after you use it. Then I have a vocoder, which in this case is off because I have a macro on the rack that I use that sometimes for like giving more of a watery sound. And then I have another OTT without over compression. Then I have frequency shifter. In this case, I'm using sort of an EQ. Because if you have nothing on the frequency shifter and you have the drive with whatever except for the 100% or 0, it will sort of shape the frequency of this sound because it's canceling a little bit. Then I have a saturator with hard curve. The drive at -5, I think it was like too much and I wanted to tame it down a little bit. Then I have a bass mono and another OTT, again without any upward compression, and this time with the time all the way up. And then I have a limiter. And that's the rack. That's basically the rack. Whatever comes next, it just depends on the sound itself. In this case was a bit of EQ and hard clipping. Next we're gonna check this patch really quick. It's just a copy of the first Faceplant patch. The only thing that I actually changed is the wavetable, which is another one of the spectral default ones, and the LFO shape. After, I just have a reverb, the stock Ableton reverb, a little bit of width, EQ, and a hard clipping. The last sound we're gonna check is this Reese Nero bass that I have on the last drop. And it's a mixture of just using sampler and kinda like the same technique I use for the Nero percussion sample. So I'm gonna take out all the effects. So basically what I did is I render a detuned saw, the classic detuned saw to make Nero basses. I put it on a sampler and I macro a bunch of things like the startup position on the sample, the glide, and the initial kind of like transient, like pitch transient or like pitch envelope. And then I just distort it, basically like the same thing. I suggest you to do this. This is a really interesting way to make Neros, because you have a bit more control over the movement of it, rather than just having two saw waves on a synth, and the higher you go it goes faster, and the lower you go it goes slower. This way, using a sample, it also do that, but you can either make the sampler loop longer when you go up or shorter when you go down, or whatever you want. Basically, you have more control. So the first thing we have in the chain is this amp. It's in the same heavy mode as the last Nero patch. Just in this case, the treble is like 6 and the dry wet is like 30% instead of 100. This is how it sounds with it. You can see it's missing a bit of movement, but the distortion and the sort of like crunchiness of it is right already there. Then I have an EQ, basically shaping the sound, an LFO, which is modulating something that comes after, a saturator. And then I wanted to give it a bit more movement, you know, filter movement. So before having this plugin, I used to do all these crazy filter movement by hand, and it was really, really annoying. It took me a long time, and most of the time when I do this kind of things, I just want random filter movements, you know. So that's what I did here. I just put a couple points and moved them randomly until I liked it, and just put an LFO moving the morph by itself. Then I have my own version of multiband compression. You can just copy the settings if you want. This is just like a preset that I made that I really like to use. any sound design. It's just like a custom preset for the multiband compression on Ableton. Is really simple. Then I have another EQ, and then I have this plugin called New Flank and Saturate, which is really good. This one I took it, I think, from Ellie Derb. He is insane, and when he showed up this plugin and what it does, I was like, whoa, this is something that I really need. And this detail preservation knob is really something. I did a couple tests with it, and you can really notice it when you try to distort a simple sine sub and noise and have this all the way up. Basically the noise, normally it distorts, but if you have it, the sub gets harmonics and the noise will not distort, which is really amazing. And I mostly use it with subs, but I also like to use it at the end of some sound design chain, just to have like a cleaner way to drive it a little bit, or like give a bit of loudness to the sound and some harmonics to the low end without affecting kind of like the quality of the high end if I like how it sounds already, you know? That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to comment if you have any question, share with your friends, and don't forget to stream the whole Beyond Ape EP with the link in the description. Also, we'll be giving away these two presets, the main flute sound, with a couple macros that I added so it can be a bit more useful for most people, and this faceplant patch. Don't forget to check those, also link in the description, and have a good day. Peace.